After having discussed what the buyer's journey is, we will discuss now what you can do with this theory and how it will help you with the creation of your digital marketing plan. Mr. So What is back, and he has a good question. What is really the purpose of this theory? How can it help us in being better marketers? How can we apply this theory to our digital marketing plan? That's what we'll discuss in this video. The buyer's journey is helpful when we are creating our buyer persona. Not only do we want to know who the buyer is by creating the buyer persona, but together with this, we need to research and find more information about the buyer's journey. Because you don't want to only identify who the buyer persona is, but you also want to identify the various steps the customers are going through when they are deciding to purchase anything. Let's look at this interesting quote from Brian Solis. What do you think this means? If we know where, why, and how our buyer persona looks for information, then it will be much easier for us to try to influence them with our digital tools. As a simple example, if we knew that our buyer persona spends many hours on Instagram every day, this means that we could use some paid advertisement on Instagram to create awareness during a stimulus stage. But we would ignore Facebook or Twitter if you would have identified that our buyer persona is not that often on these channels. So, not only do you need to create your buyer persona that describes in detail who your ideal customer is, but you also need to create your buyer's journey that will tell you exactly where your buyer persona goes at each stage of the journey and what she looks for specifically. And this is how I would recommend you to do it. You have been given a worksheet in this exact same format, which you will have to complete, and that will be part of your portfolio. There is one sheet per step. In the left column, you need to enter the chosen channel, and on the right column, you will enter the details of what the buyer persona is looking for on these specific channels. For example, here, for the stimulus, we have identified Facebook as a channel used for inspiration, as the buyer persona is looking for ski and snowboard videos. I would not recommend you to list all the possible channels that the buyer persona is using every day, but rather focusing on those channels that the buyer persona is using for travel inspiration in our case. This is the section in the buyer's journey that should be the most complete. This is the one you should spend the most time on. And this is where you will try to identify all the key channels that the buyer persona is using to find more information about the destination she wants to travel to. The focus should not be on the hotel yet, but rather on what the buyer persona wants to know around the destination. Then you move on to the F mod, where you need to identify more closely what the key purchase criteria of the buyer persona are, and what you will be looking specifically at when booking a hotel room. You can use the key purchase criteria already identified in the buyer persona worksheet, but you should go more in depth with this information. Essentially, you want to identify the factors that a customer considers as the most important when purchasing a hotel room. This stage is slightly different, as you're not talking about digital channels in this section. The information that you need to identify here will not really help you in creating your digital marketing plan. However, if you can identify the most important expectations from your customers, it will definitely help your hotel to create a better experience and help you to meet and even exceed your customers' expectations. And if you have been able to exceed customers' expectations, it is more than likely that she will talk about her experience in the UMOD step. Finally, in the UMOD section, you have to identify the places where the buyer persona is more likely to share her experience. What are the social media channels that she is most likely to use to post pictures of her stay? Instagram? Facebook? Twitter? Something else? And what type of content is she more likely to post? And what about reviews? How likely is she to post one? And where would she do that? TripAdvisor or Booking.com? The more you know about the UMOD of your buyer persona, then the better you can find ways to encourage her to share her experience. As explained in the Researching Your Buyer Persona video, it is really important that you create your buyer persona and the buying journey using some research to complete this document. You cannot create all of this information just based on assumptions. You have to base it on facts. It has been mentioned before, but one key aspect of creating your buyer persona is that you want to create the buyer's journey without taking into consideration your product. You want to look at the journey of a consumer who wants to book a holiday, and you should never mention your hotel. You just want to understand the different steps the buyer persona goes through when choosing any hotel. And remember, the reasons why we are doing all this work is to make sure that we can understand the customer as best as possible so we can communicate in the most effective way, communicating information that is interesting and valuable for your customers. For example, when your potential customer, which is based on your buyer persona, reaches your Facebook page and reads and watches the content on it, she will say, "Wow, this organization understands me and my problems. They will have a product and a service that will answer my needs." This is the last video talking about buyer persona and buyer's journey. I hope the concept is understood, and I hope that it will help you build a strong digital marketing plan.